Over in the UK, opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn has held cross-party talks to find ways to prevent a hard Brexit. He has cautioned that a no-deal Brexit will create chaos and a goldmine for speculators betting against the pound. The UK is due to leave the EU on the 31st of October. Now, for more, we're joined by Ollie Barrett from London. Ollie, this meeting, is it part of Corbyn's strategy then to replace Prime Minister Johnson in office?
Absolutely it is, but it hasn't necessarily gone entirely according to Jeremy Corbyn's plan. We have had statements from the opposition parties who've been in attendance, and they have effectively agreed that for now at least they're going to focus more on the legislative options available to them to try and avoid a no-deal Brexit. What that means is that these opposition parties are going to try and think of ways using the parliamentary process, using parliamentary business to try and legislate to force the government away from a no-deal Brexit. Perhaps, for example, they will try and legislate to force the British Prime Minister to delay the Brexit process if there is no deal in place by October the 31st. There will be more meetings taking place in the coming days to try and decide the exact strategy in that regard and the exact timing of all of this when it comes to the House of Commons and how MPs who oppose a no-deal Brexit can try and take control. That idea of a vote of no confidence in the Boris Johnson government has not gone away entirely, but it's certainly on the back burner for now. Jeremy Corbyn's plan had been to use that vote of no confidence to get himself installed as leader of a caretaker government to try and delay the Brexit process with a view to a general election in the not-too-distant future. That remains a possibility. It remains an option. It remains certainly Jeremy Corbyn's perhaps ultimate ambition to get himself into Downing Street. But for now, MPs are going to try and focus on how they can use Parliament to avoid that no-deal Brexit that so many of them oppose.
Well, what can Mr. Johnson then do to avoid crashing out at the end of October then?
Well, Boris Johnson says that if there is no deal in place by the end of October, then Britain will leave the European Union with no deal. He says that Britain has to stick to the timetable now, and he says that Britain has to honour the democratic vote that we saw in the European Union referendum. At the same time, Boris Johnson still does insist that a deal is possible. He says that there is an alternative to the backstop that was in Theresa May's withdrawal agreement with the European Union, and certainly behind the scenes there is a growing sense in Downing Street that perhaps some European leaders may be starting to listen to that. So they will be very worried indeed about the idea of MPs hijacking that process and taking control out of the government's hands. The difficulty, of course, is that Boris Johnson has effectively a majority of just one in the House of Commons, so it's going to be very, very difficult indeed for him to avoid the idea that the House of Commons can start to flex its muscles. But Boris Johnson certainly is still insistent that Britain will leave the European Union by October the 31st. It may just well be the case that he doesn't have the control to guarantee that that takes place.
All right, thanks for that update. Ollie Barrett speaking to us from London.